Biff Tannen is the orange string through the Bobberverse.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.
Greetings and salutations. My name is JJ Weinberg. I am an artist, an activist, an author, a musician, and a magician, and an alchemist, and I'm none of these things. Reminder at the beginning of every episode that your life is a perspective, it's a frame. We have to be careful. Spelling, we spell, and we cast spells. And sometimes those spells we cast open us up to new things, and sometimes they're a yoke around our neck and they keep us confined. So just be conscious of the spells that you're casting. I want to first start by thanking everyone at WVLP and my underwriters for this program, Voga, Barnes, and Denny. Last week, we were talking about Donald Trump. We talked about a lot of different things, and I missed a couple of ideas. One of the things, though, that I was talking about was this idea that a thing doesn't actually have to happen. You know, the statue, the big gold statue in the Trump presidential library, it doesn't have to actually happen. We see a synthesized version, an AI version, an augmented reality version, because our reality is absolutely augmented. If you're not familiar with the term augmented reality, not virtual reality, but augmented reality, there's an overlay on your normal field of vision. That's what augmented reality is. So you could hold your phone up and see a floating goblin in space that actually interacts with objects. You could see a billboard materialize in front of your eyes and be changed by the augmented reality. One of the best places that you would be familiar with it potentially is in Snapchat filters, or any kind of filters where you've seen the memes, you put your face in front of this camera and it distorts your face, but it's you, or it puts makeup on your face. It's augmenting your reality. And so without a doubt, we have augmented reality. And this is something I talked about in the last episode. It's something I've talked about a lot here with the notion of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, that our brains are really going to struggle. Because if perception is reality and if we see it, how do we determine whether or not it's real? We can't believe our lying eyes. Because augmented reality, and I talked about this on this podcast before it was a radio show, and I was just shooting random videos and talking about things. I think it was in 2020. And I was talking about the contact lenses that we will have in the near future. I'm, planting the flag again right now on this radio show perspective. I already talked about it 5 or 6 years ago, but I'm saying it again now. We're going to have contact lenses that augment reality. And we'll see this heads-up display, think Iron Man, and we'll see our Google Maps, we'll see our text messages, we'll see dynamic billboards, and how will we know? We'll get to the point, I believe, that we'll even be able to augment reality, our face. So you will look at somebody right across from you and not know if that's their actual face. And that's all stemming from this idea, again, that when we see this golden statue in the Trump presidential library, it doesn't even have to happen. The notion that it's been thrown out there, it already has a certain weight to it, as if it's real. the architecture plans for such and such a thing, they show the basis for this potentially happening in reality. And so there's a couple of things that I missed that I didn't get to talk about in the last episode that I want to get into here. But another curious thing, I've talked about Carl Jung a lot here, specifically as I was talking about the Val Kilmer project and the God panels. And curious enough, I want to add this in actually. I'm kind of riffing right now, going all over the place. I apologize, but it all stems from the same thing. I was doing my high intensity interval workout this morning, and I was really digging in. And I don't know if I've talked about it here or not, but the last song that I have on my playlist, I get 3 songs because it's 3 rounds and they're 3 minutes long. And so I just basically get 3 songs. The first song that I always play is one of my newest songs, a song I wrote here in 2026. And I'm repeating this mantra and I'm digging in and going over my own song and really talking my own success up while I'm in this song and I'm in this meditation and I'm in this workout. I'm showing up to this consistent pattern that is the crystal of who I am. That's what the I am is about. That's what we talk about here. And then the middle song can kind of be a little bit all over the place. It could be anything else. But the last song I play is a song I discovered this year called Run for Your Life. The artist's name is The Siege. He's a hip hop artist. Incredible. The lyrics are there, but the cinematic quality of this song is so intense. And it really builds up to the first chorus. And so I'm digging in the song, going after all the stuff that he's talking about, keeping my mantra alive and just digging and digging and digging. And right before the chorus drops in, and the chorus, it's crazy. It's just this choir singing in this epic tone and this huge, anthem of drums. And there's no other lyrics in it. But right before that intense moment happens, all of the beat drops out and he kind of whispers in this tone. He says, run for your life. Run for your life. And then it kicks on. The drums come in, this huge orchestral sound, and it feels like I'm in a movie. And I talk about this all the time. I am in a movie. This life that I live is the film of my life. And I'm the screenwriter. And with the Val thing, we say the actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts. Who am I? I'm not just a character. I play these roles. That's why, again, at the beginning, I say I'm all these things and I am none of these things. I play these roles, but I am the actor behind the character. Not only that, I'm the screenwriter, the director that the actor and the character all have to follow. So I'm listening to this song, I jam it in, and I literally put myself into a scene in a film where I've got I'm Frodo carrying the ring up the mountain, or I got a thing strapped to my back and I have to be running full speed, full sprint, whatever it is, the backpack, I got to take it to this place. And if I don't get there, civilization depends on me making this thing happen. So I'm running for my life. I hijack my fight or flight response when I hear him whisper that, and then this music kicks on and I'm running for my life because I only have this moment. And that's what we forget. We let the moment slip away from us, but we only have this moment, this now. And if I'm going to be in that, why not give it my all? And I think about the notion that there are so many people who can't run, right? So usually when I get into this, I think about Jeremiah. And if you go back some episodes, you'll hear me talking about Jeremiah, my godson. And we lost Jeremiah at 12 years old earlier this year. I think of my dad's name, Jerry. My cousin, I just lost my cousin, Jason. And of course, I think of Frances, my dog. She loved to run. And I think about, they can't run. And so I feel that pain coming up. I feel that quit. And I say, no way, man, go. They don't have the ability to run. You got to run. Lean into it. That's the pain. Good. Lean into it. You only get this chance. Run for your life because their life is expired. So I run for them and I run for me. And I've been saying this and I've been doing that in my meditation. Run for your life. And today, for the first time, I added Val into that equation. I thought, wow, yeah, run for your life. And Val can't run anymore. Val Kilmer. And I think about, I've been talking the past few weeks about this crazy coincidence on my reflections on AI and, you know, the actor's cube and all these things that you can listen to the old episodes. Again, go to jjweinberg.com/perspective and you can find the links to my YouTube channel where you'll find all of these old episodes. If you haven't been paying attention or if you're just catching this for the first time now, you got to go back to hear some of this stuff. But the God panel, the notion of him saying he wanted to try and get it right through all of this repetition, and my God tag that hangs around my neck. And again, when I work out, it's crazy because when I'm doing this exercise, it's the only time I really tuck it in because otherwise especially when I'm doing push-ups, I hit the deck and I start doing these push-ups and the dog tag, the God tag starts bouncing around. It'll chip my tooth and, you know, I'll end up looking like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber if I don't watch out. So it never dawned on me though to add Val to that equation. And I thought of it today. And so I added him into that thought process, right? And as soon as I get off the elliptical and I'm carrying my weight that I have for this workout to go put it away, I look up at the screen and what do I see? First look at Val Kilmer's AI role, the new movie coming out, Deep as the Grave. Again, Val is going to be the first actor in human history to have a full AI representation of him in the film. And it just connects to all of these crazy things. My piece, the I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, I used AI to replicate Val's voice to show this dance between character and film and all of these things. So it was really, really intense that I'm getting off the machine, carrying my weight back, and I look up and on USA Today, they're talking about first glance at Val in this film. Naturally, that's how it works. Another thing, as I'm listening to audiobooks, I do that often through the day. I'm usually, if I'm not working on something specifically, I don't listen to music a lot, which is odd. I know people say you're a musician, you're an artist. It's weird you don't listen to music. I'm usually listening to audiobooks. And I was listening to this audiobook by Carl Jung, and I was thinking about the lesson. I don't know if it was by Carl Jung, but it was on the Carl Jung's idea of shadow work. And I was thinking about how it applied to my life personally, of course. But it didn't dawn on me until I sat down at the mic to really process here the same thing overlaid on Trump. And it kind of goes back to this idea that we don't have to see the thing happen in reality for it to have an effect on us psychologically. One of the things that he's saying, Carl Jung's shadow work, and what this audiobook was saying, that a manipulator in your life will throw anything at you, sometimes absolutely false accusations. And if you want to be good, if you want to be better, you start to respond by saying, well, here is like proof and evidence that I'm a good person. No, that's not true. And that alone is the result the person's looking for. They're looking for not anything rational. They're looking for just to drain, to pull energy away from your experience. And again, I was looking at that and thinking about it in personal situations and regular life situations. And then it didn't dawn on me until I started to go behind the mic here that that's the same thing. That's what I've been saying here with this idea that the statue doesn't have to exist. A lot of times, what Donald Trump is doing as a narcissist is just looking to make sure we get a reaction, or that we give him a reaction. And it goes back to, I did a piece, an illustration. It's digital. I did it on my iPad. I think it was a couple years ago now. And I drew Donald Trump drawing on the wall with a big red crayon. And, you know, his body is a baby's body. And what I was getting at is that, and I don't know if I've talked about this here before, but what I was getting at is they say that any attention is better than no attention, especially to a child who's been deprived of attention. And so negative attention is still better than no attention. And so that's a lot of times why in the Terrible Twos, kids are drawing on the wall. Sometimes it's just creativity and they don't have boundaries and they don't know that they're not supposed to draw on the wall and all innocence. But then sometimes it's, I need attention. I want attention. I don't even care if you're yelling at me. And that's what's happening in this whole performance. It's like, just yell at me. Give me the attention. Because that attention is energy, it's currency, and it's validation for the parasite. So the thing that I was thinking about that I didn't get into the last episode, and now we're kind of coming back full circle to it. We're not witnessing just politics. This is performance in the theater of the mind. I've talked about wrestling and politics forever now. Again, jjweinberg.com/perspective. You can read some of my articles on my Medium where I really go deep into the kayfabe of politics. But it's not just performance in the abstract. It's the language of bullying and professional wrestling promos, talking smack. When you're cutting a promo and wrestling, it's dominance through words. And it's getting a rise out of the audience. That's the whole goal. So what we hear a lot of times from Donald Trump, he is a person who was schooled in the realm of professional wrestling as it applies to entertainment. So you're hearing something much closer to a wrestler on the microphone working the crowd, escalating, pushing, provoking, testing the limits of what can be said to get a reaction. And so we're always scrambling around with reason and logic saying, well, even people who have been Trump supporters, now it's like gotten to such a height. They're saying, well, how the heck can I defend this? There's like no rationality. Rationality is not what he's looking for. He's looking for energy. And the reaction is energy. What we were talking about in the last episode is Trump as a businessman, but most specifically, the business that he's in is media. It's wild because his actual physical businesses have been failures at mass levels. We talked about all of them in the last, a lot of them in the last episode. But his media success is actually pretty prominent. And that's where he gets some of this validation in the cycle of his mind, because he needs people to react. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. It's fuel. And to the media, our own regular, any media that is dependent on commercial dollars, hence why I am so adamant about supporting public media, because public media is not supposed to be at the behest of corporations. It is not supposed to be doing the bidding of politicians on either side. The point is, dollars don't affect. Of course, the dollars of our citizenry, our taxes, would go to pay that public media. But again, that public media, fairness doctrine, that's the last vestige of anything that we could hope would legitimately not be beholden to corporations and corporate dollars. But our media, this social media, the CNN, like I talked about liking Don, I like Don Lemon's content. I like his stuff. But Don Lemon and his profile and his social media is going to shrink when Donald Trump is gone. He's good for media. He has been good for media because media thrives on the chaos. And the best thing we could do is stoically look Donald Trump in the eye and say, nah, but we can't do that. We don't do that. Look at the Easter tweets. I mean, just pause for a second. The President of the United States on Easter, talking like that, dropping language I can't even say on this station. Think about how backwards that is. I'm sitting here on a local radio station held to a higher standard of speech than the president. That alone should stop you in your tracks. I don't care what quote unquote side you're on. And honestly, the F-bomb that he's dropping on Easter isn't even the point. I use it with my friends, whatever. You use it. That's not the issue. Just like the statues, just like we talked about in the last episode, the currency. Seeing his face on the drawing of the currency sets it in motion in your subconscious. You've already seen it. It doesn't have to happen to still have an effect. Because when something's seen like that, vividly imagined, it enters the psyche, it enters the subconscious. And in the other tweet, of course, I'm calling them tweets, which it's X. We all know what it is. It's a tweet. I don't know why both of these buffoons, I'm sorry. As far as branding and marketing goes, truthing and Xing are terrible backwards brand movements just to try and make it your thing. It's really silly. They're tweets. That's why we call them tweets. So in his other, truth, as he calls it, that profanity beyond the F-bomb, the profanity of violence. We've got threats about wiping out an entire civilization. An entire civilization off the face of the earth. The numbers on that, 90 million people. 90 million. Hold on to that for a second. Because we don't just throw numbers around in this case like they don't mean anything. People for the last, since 2016, they've made comparisons to his speech, to Donald Trump's motivations, to early Hitler. And often you hear people saying, and I myself say, look, don't just go to the low-hanging thing. It makes it so easy to just come back and say he hasn't killed anybody. You have to at least articulate that what you're talking about is these are the motivations of, this is the language at the beginning of. Because people would have said the same thing about Hitler in 1935. But look at the trajectory, map it out over time. So people have made comparisons. I've thought about it. At the end of it all, with Hitler, 6 million Jews and around 11 million people total when you count the full destruction of his insanity. So 11 million people. And one of what we would almost all articulate as one of the most violent and obscene times in human history. One of the top, right? 11 million. 90 million? Wipe out an entire civilization? 90 million? That's not even in the same category. It's somehow even darker. It would be something beyond anything we've ever seen. And it's weird because I said it and you can almost, my hands went up. Almost like in that gesture. And you know what's really crazy? I'm going to go ahead and admit this right now. I have seen, and this is where I'm saying, the performance, the theater. I have seen my own hand gestures sometimes mirroring his. Oh, and it's like I feel it when I do it and I say it and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But I start punctuating a point and my hands go out with that crazy, you can see it right now. You already know what I'm doing with my hands. With the hands up, right? But what I was saying, that it's something beyond anything we've ever seen. It's like he would almost articulate that as a triumph. I'm going to create violence, destruction beyond anything that's ever been seen. Because I can do destruction like nobody can do destruction. It's such a wild caricature, but it's so on, unfortunately. So the question about that 90 million, the threat, I will wipe off an entire civilization from the face of the planet. Why even say it? Why even say it? It ties right back into what we've been talking about. It doesn't have to happen to affect you. So what are we supposed to believe? We're being told Trump is not like Hitler. We're being told, and the argument is he's not done any of that type of stuff. But if he's to say 90 million people, he said it. Are we supposed to believe it? He wants us to believe it. So it's even almost more perverse in some way that he wants us to believe it without doing it. But he can't, you don't say something like that if you don't want people to believe it. And so in that, he's taking ownership of the idea of a full-on 90 million people wiped off the face of the planet. Women, children, no consideration. So he's saying it. It's going into your psyche. Just like that statue doesn't have to be built, just like the currency doesn't have to change. You see it in the theater of your mind. You can picture it. It's already doing something to your brain, to your fight or flight, to your stress levels. And especially like people who never leave their town. Like you think about that statue. People who never leave their town or their county, they wouldn't know if the statue is there or not. They could be told it was there, shown a great picture of it and believe it happened. They never meet the guy behind the tweets, behind the truths, behind the X's, whatever you want to call it. We never see any of it in real life anyway. But if he says something like that, it means he wants us to believe that he's capable of it. And without a doubt, it means it's crossed his mind. Think about the implication of that it's crossed his mind. I'm not a fan of the idea of Orwellian, Philip K. Dick, Minority Report, Fahrenheit 451 thought crimes. But when you're the president, you don't just get to throw that out there like it's nothing. I mean, we've all heard this analogy for free speech, right? We have free speech. We live in the United States of America, the First Amendment. Free speech is not shouting fire in a crowded theater. Your free speech isn't protected at that point. Shouting fire falsely in a crowded theater is not a protected free speech. And so the question there then is, how is that not shouting fire right now? For him to have made that kind of obscene comment. Because words at that level, they're not just words, they're signals. So either he believes he could do something like that, or he wants you to believe that he could. He's not just projecting strength, he's projecting the capacity for absolute destruction, even if he never does it. Once that image is in your head, you can't unsee it. Now we have to process through that lens. And that's part of the trick. Just like in wrestling, you don't even have to destroy your opponent. You just have to convince the crowd that you actually could. And once they believe it in some capacity, you've already won the match. So anyway, that is really what I wanted to make sure and cover that I missed in the last episode, talking about the theater of it all. We're being sold something. Do we buy it? Is he telling the truth? When is he telling the truth? But now on to this next idea. I was watching The Man in the High Castle. I'm a big Philip K. Dick fan. You probably are a Philip K. Dick fan as well. Like I said, I talked about Minority Report. If you've seen Blade Runner, Paycheck, man, there are so many. But Man in the High Castle is based off of a Philip K. Dick book. And if you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend it. It's really intense, but it's about this alternate timeline where the Nazis won. The Nazis won, the Axis powers won World War II, and what life would look like. And there's a moment towards the end of the show. So I don't know if this is a spoiler. I don't think it is. It might be. So if you don't want, skip ahead like a few minutes. I don't know. But it's, a man who's just seen so much. And he's seen through the veil. And he finally says the quiet part out loud. And he turns to one of the other characters. I'm trying not to spoil anything. He says, "We've seen things, you and I. Other worlds, other lives. We have that in common. And it's unbearable to be able to look through that door and see all the people you could have been. And know that out of all of them, this is the one you became." I was like, wow, man, that is so intense and powerful, and it makes me think of the stuff that we talk about on perspective, the notion of choosing your timeline, choosing your script, choosing your dream, becoming lucid, finding the crystalline self by the patterns, the map of your decisions over your life. And just to hear him say that, to see all the people that you could have been and know that out of all of them, this is the one you became. He's lamenting the choices that he made. And it's like he saw all of these other paths. And if you just sit with that, I think we can meditate. We can close our eyes, even though this is obviously Philip K. Dick, science fiction, fantasy craziness. If you just hold on to your thoughts for a minute, if you stop, you can imagine these other timelines. You can see them. And it's about which one will I articulate? Which one will become the mirror? So like, this isn't just science fiction, right? It's selection. Go back to some of the early episodes here of Perspective, and I'm often quoting Viktor Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning, one of my favorite books of all time. And again, ironically, we're talking about The Man in the High Castle. We're talking about Nazi Germany and Trump talking about 90 million people. And the next thing you know, we're talking about Viktor Frankl again. That's how these things are connected. This golden thread that ties them all together. But Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning says, a human being is a deciding being. And when he's saying that from Auschwitz. He's saying they can take everything from you, but they can't take away your freedom to choose how you will react. That's why he's writing the book inside of a concentration camp. And that's why his book became one of the most powerful books ever written. But if he would have let them take it away, we wouldn't have that book. We wouldn't be quoting Viktor Frankl saying that a human being is a deciding being. It's not science fiction. It's selection. This is the technology of I am. It goes right back to the piece, the Val Kilmer, I am your Huckleberry Finn. I am. The poems, the dreams, all of these things that we've been talking about. So every decision you make, every thought you entertain, every story that you tell yourself, you're not just living a life, you're collapsing a waveform. That's what quantum physics tells us. That until it's observed, the observer effect, the theory that the mere act of observing or measuring a situation, it inevitably alters the phenomenon. It's fundamental to quantum physics. Measuring particles changes their behavior and state, collapsing probability waves into defined particles. So the moment that you realize there are other versions of you, you've all felt that. You're collapsing a waveform. You're choosing a timeline. I've been feeling it even more profoundly in 2026. I'm more conscious of it. I'm cognizant. When I'm on that, elliptical machine and I'm pushing and I'm running for my life, I'm choosing a timeline. I'm putting myself as the lead role in my film. I know you felt that. That moment, again, where you realize like there are other versions of you. Cleaner, braver, kinder, darker, richer, lost, whatever it is. Somehow, through a million tiny choices, you crystallized into this one. We've talked about that so many times. And that's what Back to the Future 2 understood and has shown me since I was a kid. Back to the Future 2 is just one of my favorite movies of all time. And no wonder that all these ideas are so familiar, because in this sci-fi movie, in time travel, it's been something I reflect on since I was a kid. Gray's Sports Almanac in Back to the Future 2, it isn't just a plot device. The book itself is temptation. It's greed. It's this idea that if you knew the future, you could bend reality to your will. And the paradox is this: Marty's desire to control the future is exactly what breaks it open. Creates the dystopia, creates that alternate timeline that hands the power to Biff Tannen. Biff's Pleasure Paradise, right? If you've not seen Back to the Future 2, this is not going to land for you. Shame on you for not watching Back to the Future 2. Go watch it, because if you want to see Donald Trump in full flesh in, I think it was 1987 when Back to the Future 2 came out. He's modeled, Biff in Back to the Future 2 is modeled on Donald Trump. So that's why, to me, Donald Trump has always been the Biff to me being Marty McFly. So Biff, again, never just Biff. He was always something else, a symbol. He was the orange thread. And now with my happy little hairdos, my Bob Ross parody, where I have Bob Ross as the Punisher, appearing as the Varnisher, ready to fight to save public media. He's fighting against the King Pig, Walden Guilt, the orange thread that goes through all of these multiverses, these windows of imagination, the frequency that shows up again and again, different skins, different timelines. Biff, Cheeto Santana. You'll learn about Cheeto Santana if you stick around me too long. Donald Trump, of course, the Killer Kowalski. It's the same energy. Excess, control, illusion, gold-plated emptiness. Just phony extravaganza. But in some capacity, Marty is responsible for it. It was that was in him first. And if he hadn't had that inclination, Biff would have never known. And that Biff wouldn't have existed. Would our Biff have existed had we not had that informing our collective unconscious, our subconscious? It's all this connects, because what the High Castle shows you and what Back to the Future warns us about is that timelines aren't stumbled upon. They're not found. They're chosen. So for me, my multiverse is the Bobberverse. We don't just watch these alternate realities. We peek through them. So for me, the Varnisher isn't fiction. He's a possibility. I know all this is intense, but you got to stick with me because I'm going to need more Bobs this year. We had Bob Mobs last year. We showed up, for the joy of protesting, and we showed up for the Million Bob March in Washington, D.C. on October 29th. That's Bob's birthday. We're doing it again this year. I need 10,000 Bobs with me this year, October 29th. I need Bobs with me in Chicago. We're going to march up to Biff's Pleasure Paradise, and we're going to spread joy, and we're going to spread creativity. But the Varnisher is a possibility. A Bob Ross who didn't get PBS. A Bob Ross who came out of the military. If you're not familiar with Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed, incredible documentary about Bob Ross and how his brand was stolen from him and the family. But it talks a lot about Bob's life. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that Bob was in the military. He was in the Air Force, and he was, a mean SOB, they say. He was just a nasty sergeant that would kind of, so part of Bob's persona, or the impetus for Bob's, like for him to crystallize the Bob that we know, the soft-spoken, I'm Bob Ross, and this is the joy of painting. That Bob Ross, I don't even know if you could hear that. I almost whispered it, and that's the whole point of Bob's persona, was that he was never going to shout. He was never going to be mean again, and he said he couldn't do that. He didn't want to embody that anymore. But imagine a Bob Ross who comes from military service but doesn't have a canvas waiting for him. He doesn't have Muncie, Indiana, in that small, quaint little station ready for the joy of painting. He could have turned into Frank Castle. Frank Castle was a Marine. He became the Punisher. A world that was already painted over, whitewashed, commercialized, owned. Instead of teaching people how to paint happy little trees, he becomes something else, a reckoning. And that's what my happy little hairdos. I have actually 10,000 bobs. I say we always know Bob because of his afro. But if you watch that film, you'll also see that the afro kind of became a prison to him, his brand. When you look at a person's hair, that alone is like this mask. We talked about removing the mask and the I'm your Huckleberry Finn and this notion of the mask that we wear and who it says that we are. You can change an identity just by changing your hairstyle. So I have 10,000 bobs in the Bobberverse. Well, 10,000 plus. And they're all something else. They're a different person, a different personality. And instead of, teaching people how to paint happy little trees, this Bob becomes a reckoning. Because you can change just one condition. Just one. And you don't get the same man. You get a different timeline. You get a different articulation of I am. Peeking into this alternate timeline, the Punisher, Bob Ross, the Varnisher. I know I've been leaning heavy into comics. I'm going to go even more into it. But I grew up thinking I was going to be a comic book artist. That was my goal when I was a kid. But I think even if you look at the huge success of specifically Marvel comics in film in the last, 15 years, whatever it's been, it's so big because I think it's like Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey, what we all go through, the monomyth, the universal idea of a protagonist going from their basic world into this supernatural wonder, winning by decisive victory, coming back, transformed. And so comics are often our modern mythology. There are new gods. And Marvel really gets into a lot of these ideas. Like if you look at Loki, if you're not familiar with the Loki TV series, it's on Disney. It's amazing, especially for the analogies of the multiverse that it's talking about. So in Loki, you're not just watching time travel, it's identity fragmentation. When I'm talking about being seen as the one through the many, when we talk about having a dream and realizing that you're all of the figures in your dream, they're just reflections of you. And so every Loki you see isn't a different person. It's a different choice made, a different response at a different critical moment. One Loki chooses power. Another version of Loki chooses survival, love, betrayal. And suddenly you don't have one character. You have a field of possibilities wearing the same face. That's what the multiverse is. Not infinite space, but infinite decisions. And the TVA in Loki calls these variants. So I have 10,000 Bob Ross variants. How many variants are there of J.J. Weinberg? How many variants are there of you? Just a version of you that refused to follow the script. When we talk about timelines, we're not talking about somewhere else. We're talking about the roles you did or didn't take, the words you did or didn't say, the person you didn't become and collapsed this person. The multiverse is the casting room of the soul. And we can look at the Spider-Verse, the Bobberverse. It's about not the mask, but who's behind the mask. Every version of Spider-Man is proof that destiny isn't a straight line. It's a web. And then that leads me right back to another articulation through the mystics, Indra's net, Indra's web. The idea that all of these synchronicities, the serendipities, they're jewels in Indra's web. So every thread is in that web is a decision. The question isn't which Spider-Man is real. The question is, which one are you choosing to be? We're not just living our life, we're casting it. We're assigning ourselves roles in real time. Hero, victim, creator, destroyer, observer. The wild part is we can choose roles mid-scene. We can change. We can switch them. The multiverse isn't happening somewhere else. It's happening every time you say, I am this instead of I am that. So dreams are like the multiverse without the filter of who you are in this moment. They're the backstage where all the actors are still in costume, waiting, watching. And then when you wake up, you call it just a dream. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a glimpse through the same door that John Smith was talking about in The Man in the High Castle? And if we go back to Marty, because again, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Marty is judging Biff. We're judging Biff. Biff is loud, greedy, vulgar. He's the villain. We can do this the hard way or the easy way. It's really funny with the whole Jimmy Kimmel situation. When there was the notion of canceling Jimmy Kimmel and the FCC and the whole idea of we can do this the hard way or the easy way. That was one of the quotes I heard. And I was like, wait a second. That's literally what Biff Tannen's henchman said to Marty McFly as he showed up in front of Biff's casino in Back to the Future 2. I was like, that's a little bit too on the nose that they literally said the exact same phrase. But anyway, Biff, loud, greedy, vulgar, that's easy, clean, external. We're projecting and judging. But Marty's the one who wanted the shortcut first. He's the one who looked at the future and said, how can I use this for me? And that's the seed. That's the moment. That was the fracture in the timeline. Because Biff didn't invent the corruption. He, in a way, inherited the idea from Marty. He just amplified it. He becomes the version of Marty, but Marty refuses to see it. And that's Carl Jung's shadow work. Not the evil out there, but the part of you in here that you don't want to claim. You don't get to defeat Biff by pretending you're not like him. We defeat Biff by realizing that he started in us. Because as long as we project the shadow, we empower it. We turn it into an enemy. We feed it. We give it a body, a name, a face. The orange thread materializes as Biff or as Trump or as the killer Kowalski or King Pig. But when we integrate it, when we say, that's me too. I was just like that at a certain point in time. We start to collapse the timeline. We stop feeding the version of reality that requires a villain. And now we're not reacting, we're choosing. Back to Viktor Frankl. This is why Viktor Frankl matters. He stood in the darkest timeline imaginable. Stood in Auschwitz and said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude. And I started thinking about Machiavelli. He says that a leader has to be cold and calculated, indifferent, ruthless, right? If you're easily aroused, easily offended, you wear your heart on your sleeve, react with passion, react emotionally, your ego is easily bruised, easily offended, then you're weak and you're controllable. And when we think about Biff, he's so all of those things. So how does that add up? Well, what if there's a genius behind this multiverse orange thread, behind the man, the orange mask? What if there's a character on the stage that he's just embodying. Like using life as a stage, social media, the big drama, this play. That's another possibility that we should contend with. Like, what if the thing that we're laughing at isn't accidental? What if the bumbling fool is the mask, the role, the character, created by some more sinister Lex Luthor? Something even more diabolical is hiding behind this mask, because memes are a mask, a distraction in the propaganda of our times. I had a podcast in 2020 that said Hitler and Goebbels would have been meme men, not mean men. They were mean men as well, but meme men. They would have relished the meme for propaganda. But when you read The Prince, Machiavelli doesn't say the leader has to be virtuous. He says the leader has to appear virtuous, maybe, but the ruler doesn't have to be honest. He says the ruler must understand perception, control it, shape it, exploit it. What if we've been reacting exactly how we were meant to? This multiverse Biff is just a court gesture, outrage, mockery, obsession, constant attention, because attention in this economy specifically is energy. Energy is power, especially in the 24-hour yellow press on steroids social media landscape. So what if instead of a man losing control, we're watching a character being played? Like I think of Sacha Baron Cohen's Borat. The costume isn't just clothing, it's method acting. It's commitment, deep commitment. The line between the character and reality disappears. He never washes the suit. He doesn't wash the suit, so it smells. It's a way of him hijacking a stereotype in his target's mind. Well, what if Trump's just like not washing the suit that he's wearing of this character? Like I imagine this scene in a dark room where he has a different voice, a different tone, serious, calculated, using 5 and 6 syllable words. But he's talking to his team about this illusion that they're creating, this mask that they're constructing so that people think they can control him in that way, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Not in the Machiavellian sense. So what if the voice, the gestures, the tone, they're just an exaggeration and it's spectacle? Otherwise, in Machiavellian terms, it's super strange that we would have elected him into this position. I mean, maybe you could make the argument it's because people see a mirror. You know, oh, this guy represents me, an insecure, Caucasian, racially insensitive misogynist. And he gets away with it at the highest levels. That means he represents me. Maybe that's why he even wears that mask, though. Otherwise, how would he be relatable to common people in the Midwest, for instance? That's never the persona that he's had. But Lex Luthor, the Machiavellian, sinister version, maybe it's just a caricature being presented. Biff Tannen. It's easy to present Biff Tannen because Biff has already been articulated in the multiverse. He's already been articulated in Back to the Future. So he wears a familiar mask. With a showman, it's a possibility we have to consider. So in the Bobberverse, he's King Pig with a gold-plated snout, speaking into the white hat mandate. The injunction to make Fromoville blank again. It all circles back to Bob. In fact, to talk about Bob again, Bob didn't deny the darkness. He even said that we need the darkness in order to see the light. I need you to show up to the Bobberverse with me this year. Show up if you can to my GoFundMe campaign, gofundme.com/savepbs.
Biff Tannen is the orange string through the Bobberverse.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg. This is my perspective.